Welcome to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe and hit the bell icon for new updates. What have I done? What came over Muho am I? It was wonderful. I loved every minute of it, Goldie. Hawn has been America's sunshine for over 50 years, golden girl of Hollywood. Always lawing, always glowing, always lighting up the screen like. No one else but even the brightest stars have dark sides. And Goldie's dark sides have names because for all her sweetness, she's kept a list of actors who crossed her, said mean things to her, or embarrassed her when no cameras were around. Men who thought herkiness meant she was weak, men who learned Ned's hard way she wasn't some rare movie. His partners who turned mean the moment the camera stopped rolling. Others tried to be nice to her and got angry when she didn't play along, a few said. She was just a pretty face until she walked away and left them in trouble for years. Goldie kept the stories to herself, but now, at 7 to 9. The filter is gone and the truth is coming out. She won't say their name straight out. She doesn't have to. Because the bad feelings were there all along, and in one case, it almost ruined an entire movie. Thy first name on her list, a comedy starwo, turned their fun movie, said Ento, a Warzone 1. Chevy Chase When Foul Play came to theaters in 1978. People fell in love with the silly chemistry boot Ween, Goldie Hawn, and Chevy Chase. But what they didn't see was the mess behind the scenes, according to people who were there. Chevy's behavior when cameras weren't rolling was anything but nice. He was hard to predict. Mudgeon always went against director Colin Higgins, making up lines without warning, saying no to takes. He didn't like in throwing entire scenes into chaos just for his own fun. His big ego, ready, famous from Saturday Night Live, got even bigger. Moment the camera stopped rolling, he'd yell at crew members for bothering his rhythm. Get upset when Goldie got a laugh and had Tohave the final word in almost every creative choice. What looked easy on screen was behind the scenes a slow-motion train. Wreck Goldie, always the professional. Tried to keep things light, made jokes, helped everyone feel better, and smoothed over his angry outbursts. But that crack started to show one crew member hard, her whisper to a hairstylist. He's not funny when the cameras stop rolling's just mean. And she wasn't lying. Crew members remember Chevy going into angry speeches about how he was carrying the movie, making fun of Goldie's lines, and once even saying no to shoot a scene until it was changed to give him something actually funny to say. Whew! Making things up to make the story better was ruining it to feed his own egos. Bad feelings reached a breaking point by the final weeks of filming. The two were barely talking unless they absolutely had to. Chevy, known for his smegitude and mean sarcasm, reportedly made nasty comments about Goldie's flirty character and questionator comedy skills, completely ignoring fact she had been one of Hollywood's most successful and loved stars for almost 10 years. She's lucky to be in my world. He supposedly told a producer his shot wasn't hidden, it dripped from every look, every sigh, every mean joke thrown her way like a bomb with a smile. Goldie didn't fight back publicly, never played the victim, but those close to her say she was quietly heartbroken. She told friends she'd never felt more disrespected by a movie partner. Anya assistant said she began quietly asking to practice alone, just to avoid being near. Chevy's toxic mocking and RG, what began as a fun comedy turned into an emotional nightmare with crew members walking on eggshells and quietly picking sides. The feeling on set became tense, joyless. Antics housing what should have been a career highlight instead became a test off how much she could take. Everyone just wanted to make it to the rap party without screaming. One makeup artist remembered Chevy, meanwhile, seemed to not care, or worse, happy. His habit of taking over scenes and cutting down others had earned him a bad reputation even before Foul Play. Boothus was the project that made it permanent. Crew members who had looked up to him from far away quickly got sick of him. He wasn't a genius. One lighting worker later said he was a bully with good timing. Another worker added he treated the set like his kingdom owned. Everyone else like his servants. Despite the filmmaking lots of money, Goldie said no to any talk of sequels or a few to work together. Studios pushed hard, offering money, prestige, even Oscar chances. But she wouldn't even return the calls, not interested. It's the only message she gave her agent, that silence said everything. Gunned. She meant it to this day. There are no warm interviews, nostalgia, no epiphotos of her with Chevy Chase, just a deep, permanent split. She put him on her personal do not work with list, and he never got off it. But the man who came after Chevy on that list, let's just say he wasn't treating to ruin a film he was towing her over to Warren Beatty in the 1970s. Warren Beatty wasn't just a movie star. He was a force, charming, sneaky, and always caught up in drama. He was as famous for his off-screen love life as was for his box office success. Heading to date women, he chased them like prizes, and yes, at one point, he had high size locked on Goldie Hawn. At first she was flattered. Who wouldn't be? Beatty had power, and in Hollywood power could open doors. He invited her to lunch, then dinner, then 2 parties where his compliments were a little too smooth. On his hands stayed too long. Goldie played it cool, polite, but not interested. Knew the game and didn't want to a small story in the Beatty romance book. She'd watched other actresses fall under his spell, only to be thrown away like yesterday's newspaper. She turned him down repeatedly, and that's when the charm broke. Warren wasn't used to being told no, certainly not from someone he saw as not important. He liked his women agreeable, and his power unchallenged. People close to the situation say he started taking cheap shots behind closed doors. Director Shard whispers that Goldie was unreliable, too comedic, not serious enough for real work, to laugh off her name in meetings, throw out digs disguised as jokes, and roll high size if someone brought up her work. A familiar script. If he couldn't have hurt her career. It worked. Quietly, steadily, doors began to close. Meetings were canceled, scripts she'd be improvised. Disappeared invitations, 2 seconds of rooms that mattered. Gone. Warren didn't destroy her career in one big dramatic moment. He did it the Hollywood way. Through suggestion, doubt, and carefully placed comments in the writers. One producer remembered being warned that Goldie wasn't a safe bet for a serious role because she had too much baggage. The only baggage, of course, was Beatty's. Her ego. Goldie saw it for what it was. I don't mix business with power games, she told one reporter when asked if she'd ever work with him. Thought it was as much as she ever said publicly. Privately, though, she was more direct. A former assistant remembered her muttering, "He doesn't handle being told no, punishes it." And punish it he did professionally, surgically, and without of her getting his hands dirty. She never fought back in interviews, never joined it's gossip, but the people closest to her knew the truth. Beatty's name was Poisonto. Her said only in groans and side glances when studio boss brought up his name for possibly co-starring roles. She'd cut them off with a look. That's not happening. She'd say flatly there was no anger in it, just certainty, like she was talking about a locked door she'd thrown away. Key, too. One friend said she did digest close the chapter she burned through whole book years later at a fancy word show. Beatty tried to play the old game. He walked up to her, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Goldie smiled right back, cool, elegant, and turned on her heel without a word. A few feet away, a reporter caught it all and muttered a thought smile could freeze hell. But the next man on her do not work list didn't try talk harm. Her, he didn't whisper behind her back. He tried to embarrass her right there in front of an entire casting room. 3. Dustin Hoffman. The room was quiet, just a handful of producers, a casting director, and 2 of Hollywood's bright stars reading lines across from each other. Goldie Hawn had been invited to try out for a serious drama Harari and purposeful change from her usual comedy roles. She came prepared, grounded, and ready to prove her range. Dustin Hoffman was already here. At first it felt electric, 2 big stars in the same space, but the moment they began reading, something changed. Hoffman, known for his super intense acting style and unpredictable mood, stopped the scene cold. "You re not connecting?" he said, flatline, interrupting her mid-sentence. The room got tense. Ethan, with a smirk, he turned to the producers and added, "She's still playing it like a sitcom." Goldie froze. The producers chuckled, some nervously, some not. They weren't sure if it was part of the act. It wasn't. It was embarrassment delivered with perfect precision. If you hadn't come to work together, came to put her down, what should have I been? A reading turned into a live autopsy, and Goldie was the victim. Shep Award through the rest of the Reading Eyes focused voice. Steady, but something inside had changed. It wasn't just embarrassment, it was betrayal. She knew the difference between tough direction and ego-driven sabotage. This wasn't about performance, it was about control. She walked out of that room, not just disappointed, but done. The next day, she dropped out of the project. With the hesitation, people close to the situation say she told her agent, "I don't fight to be taken seriously by men who've already decided I'm a joke." She said no to multipluffers, to make up or try out with a different actor she made it crystal clear she would never work with. Dustin Hoffman again, and she didn't need to. Her leaving said more than any formal statement ever could. The investor pretended not to notice, but those who had been in that casting room knew what had happened. Hoffman hadn't exposed a problem, he'd exposed himself. It wasn't criticism. It was controlled disguised as crafted. Wasn't method acting, it was method. Abuse for Goldie, it wasn't about a hurt ego. It was about dignity. Years later, she told an interviewer. In this business, some men forget they're not directing the women around them. Thasu, who knew her well, had no doubt who thought was aimed at privately. She admitted the moment haunted her, not because she lost her role, but because, for a split second, she began to question her own gut feelings, and that, for someone like Goldie, was the deeper betrayal. Hoffman didn't just try to control a scene, he tried to cut her down at the root. He didn't see a peer across from him. He saw someone he could knock off balance for fun. He treated the audition like a stage, and Goldie like a prop in his one-man show. A close friend remembered that Goldie went home that night, wrote in her journal, first time in years. "He tried to make me small," she wrote. "I won't let him anch," didn't she? Never went back to that corner of the industry on anyone else's terms. She carved her own path, her own pace, her own definition. Of success, she proved that you didn't need to give up commodity to be powerful. You just had to tune it. When asked later if she'd try an Thor dramatic lead, she'd flash her signature smile and say, "If the room's right." It was her way of saying everything, while saying almost nothing but the next name on her list. That one caught her off guard and made her rethink comedy altogether. Fourth, Bill Murray. He showed up an hour late to the first table read. No apology, no explanation, just a loud entrance on joke at someone's expense and a half-finished coffee. He plopped on tath script pages like they were drink coasters. Bill Murray was in early talks to work with Goldie Hawn in a late 80s comedy, a quirky studio movie metaphor. His off-the-cuff charm on paper, it looked like a dream pairing. Goldie was America's sweetheart, and Bill was comedy's wild card. But within minutes, off that first meeting, Goldie knew something was wrong. As the reading began, Murray did what Murray was famous for. He went wildly off script, making fun of the dialogue, cutting down beats and turning serious scenes into joke fodder. Hemmed faces, he rolled his eyes. He acted like the script was a personal insult. Tohis genius writers sat in shocked silence as he rewrote whole sections on spot, making their work feel through away at first. Goldie tried to keep things light, playing along with a four-side smile. She'd worked with people who made things up before, but this felt different. Then mid-sentence, Murray turned to her and said with a smirk, "Why don't you try acting like you've done drama before?" Laughter broke out across the room, from the kind of men who mistook meanness for comedy. Goldie didn't laugh. Closeted, her script stood up during a break and quietly left. She didn't throw a fit. She didn't demand rewrites. She didn't evoneraise her voice. But the next day, her team called the producers. She was out in a press release. No gossip leak, just a clear, firm exit. Rumors swirled in person close to the situation, said she told. "A friend thinks being unpredictable is genius. I think it's exhausting." Another said sure in her reps to stay away from any future projects with comedians. Hogan fussed disrespect with being spontaneous. It wasn't about one bad joke. It was about a pattern, a whole culture of so-called brilliant men who used their charisma like weapons and called it art. They bulldozed scenes, stole attention, and left their female co-stars cleaning up the emotional mess. There was no moment of making up. No warm interview. Years later, Goldie never brought him up, never looked back. Pushed for a repairing more Thanans. After all, she was still profitable. He was still being called iconic brother. Response was always the same. No interest. She didn't slam the door. Cher moved the entire house from her map. That set became her breaking point. Goldie didn't just walk away from the film. She began turning down a whole type of roles. No more buddy comedies built around difficult. No more Arsenis where she had to smile while being overshadowed or made fun of that charm. Nay, he's just being Bill Thebenthesine's apologies that Al West came too late. She was done. She started saying no more often, and not gently not apologetically asked in an interview. Why she pissed on so many male-led comedies in the late 80s and early 90s? She smiled. Knowing smile and said I chose peace. And peace for Goldie meant never having to babysit another overgrown man child on set again, but if. Bill Murray said chaotic storm of ego, an impulsive next man in her world was something colder, candulated cutting, and it all went down at a charity dinner she would never forget. 5 Sean Penn. It was soaped to be a feel-good night high-profile charity gala in Malibu filled with celebrities. Industry powerhouses and cameras flashing from every corner. Goldie Hawn had been invitado, gave a short speech on mental health and mindfulness, a topic deeply personal to her. She wasn't there to sell a brand or plug a film. She spent days writing something sincere. It wasn't self-promotion. It was heart, but before she even reached the stage, Sean Penn seated just a few tables away, was already making a scene rolling, high sigh, sighing dramatically, shifting in his seat like a bored teenager. Multiplegists later confirmed, hearing him utter under his breath, Another celebrity wellness sermon. A few chuckled most. I didn't know what to do. The ones horse-backed Goldie stayed quiet. Uncomfortable, the others followed Pennsled, pretending his sarcasm was smart after her speech, gentle, vulnerable, and met with warm applause. Penn leaned back in his chair, and loud enough for several Tibbles to hear scoffed, she should stick-toe, giggling. Goldie didn't flinch. Cher raised her glass, smiled like nothing had happened, and slipped out early, but those closest to her knew. She was boiling not fake anger, something deeper, disgust, wrapped in self-control, not because of her ego was hurt, but because of mething. She genuinely believed in something she shared honestly had been casually put down by a man who thought this brand of negativity was somehow more valuable than her hope, a man who built this image on tortured rebellion and couldn't understand that vulnerability. Might be a kind of strength, too, in the care at home, one source said. She cried no doubt of hurt, but out of deep, bone-tired frustration my whole career. Cher reportedly said, and I'm still reduced at giggles by men who don't know what hell I stand for. That night, she drew a new boundary: no interviews with Sean Penn, no joint appearances. Not polite air kisses across her room. When skid about him later, she gave a practiced smile and a short answer, not me. Okay. Energy privately, she was more pointed, you can believe. In activism, she told friends, without stomping on Sumia Niels's purpose. Penn had always been intense aggressively, so his anger was tabloid fodder. His rage almost fake. Directors called it passion. Goldie saw something else. Monasticized as conviction. With Goldie I thought differently. It wasn't a feud or a moment. They were never close enough forth it. It was a dismissal plain and public hand it left. Crack she never bother with Ofix. After that night, she became super picky about the spaces she in too. She'd been gracious for decades, but now she demanded more respect, more thoughtfulness, more care, no more rooms with men who thrived on making others feel small, just to feel bigger, and when their paths did cross again, at a word, shows mutual friends. Parties shouldn't play the game. She kept her distance, met his glances with blank politeness, and left early every time. But, final name on her list, that one was different. He wasn't a co-star, a pure Avon, a rival. A T was a Hollywood legend, Osog. Gentleman. And he made her question whether old-school respect ever really applied to women like her. 6. Kirk Douglas. Goldie Hawn always honored legacy. She understood what it meant to step in rooms built by giants to work beneath golden glow of names that shaped Hollywood, and few names were bigger than Kirk Douglas. But respect isn't same as admiration, and behind the curtain, Goldie felt the weight of what those legends too often represented. She never publicly criticized him. That wasn't her style, but those close to her say Douglas left her deeply unsettled, not for something obvious, but for how easily he made her feel smell decorative, dismissible, industry events. Douglas would greet her with exaggerated charm, old-school gestures like and kisses, drawn-out winks, and comments about her looks wrapped in velvet condescension. Some, it was nostalgic, gentlemanly behavior to Goldie. It was suffocating. He talks tome like I'm still the blonde in a Bickenizine. She reportedly told a friend, and I've won an Oscar. There was no single insult, no explosive moment. It was quieter than that, more sneaky the constant interruptions during panels. The way her insights were brushed aside in serious discussions. The introduction check called others visionary, while Shua. The beautiful Miss Han Xianza confided, you can be #1 on the call sheet and still feel like the decoration. It wasn't about meanness. It was about how deeply certain men had been trained to connect a woman's presence. With her prettiness and little eels, that kind of dismissal doesn't leave. Bruises it leaves, echoes, and Goldie heard them for years while she maintained warm professional ties with his son Michael Douglas, whom she praised him, his generosity and modern respect. Kirk remained to her a relic, a reminder of a Hollywood that never saw past her smile, no matter how many scripts she wrote, no matter how much creative control she fought for and earned. When a producer remembered her walking out of a round table after, Douglas interrupted her. For the third time in 5 minutes, I've said what I need to say, she reportedly said, before calmly exiting the room. Tothis. Goldie rarely brings him up, not because of fear or diplomacy, but because, in her own words, some men don't deserve a second act in your memory. But if there's one thing Hollywood understands about Goldie, on its her memory, behind the laughter, the disarming spontaneity, the golden aura. That Madihor, a household name, was something else entirely. Iron, a will sharpened by decades of being. Doubted minimies it mocked. Always with a grin, she remembered Divry. Joke that wasn't really a Jakivri eye roll disguised as feedback every moment she was dismissed before she even opened her mouth.